Hello everyone, welcome back to NetAssassin. In this installment, I'm going to be showing you how to set up time-based rules. The example that I will be using is that of setting up a profile for a child who has multiple devices that they use on the home network, and then restricting the days of the week and the hours in which that child can utilize those devices to access the internet. This example will only contain the time limitations. As for content filtering, that will be in another video where I show how to use a proxy. The demonstration version of PfSense that I'm utilizing has interfaces and IP addresses assigned to them, as well as within the DHCP scope that we're going to be working with. Please do not modify yours to match these. They're irrelevant. They're simply the ones that I set up as defaults on my interfaces. In order for this to work, each device that we wish to restrict needs to have a static IP address. You can do this in one of two ways. The first is to assign a static address to the device itself on the device. This is a little bit time-consuming, and depending on how the device updates itself and other varying factors, could mean that that IP address changes and then your firewall rule doesn't work very well. What we're going to be doing instead, since we are also running DHCP services from our PfSense or from any other DHCP server that you might have, is we're going to do static assignments of IP addresses for the devices on the network. Specifically, just the ones that the child is using. So in this case, we're going to open up our DHCP server, and you'll see I've already created two static addresses inside of the system. One for an Xbox One and one for an iPad. Let's add a third for a pretend Nintendo DS. You always start by adding the MAC address of the device. Please refer to the user manual for how to find the MAC address of any given device. You can also cheat, and if the device already has an IP address that's been assigned by the DHCP server, there's a simple plus button next to that entry which will bring you to this and auto-fill in this section for you. In our case, since this is a demonstration firewall, there are really no devices behind it, so we're doing it completely manually. We've entered in the MAC address. We're now going to give it an IP address. Please note, the IP address that I am supplying to this device is not what you would give it on your own network unless, of course, you're using this same CIDR. The only thing that is important is the IP address that you provide to it cannot already be used, and luckily it will check that for you. And the other is that it should not overlap with any auto-assigned addresses, otherwise you'll create an IP conflict. So in this case, we've assigned it an IP address that's outside of the DHCP scope, but is still within the CIDR for the network that we're using. We'll also give it a host name. This is great because we'll be able to look this device up in DNS, and if you're ever looking at the traffic graphs on the PfSense itself, you can select host name and you can see exactly then which device it is that's using the network and how much bandwidth it's using. So in this case, we're going to put in here Nintendo DS. And for our description, we're going to call it a Nintendo DS. And we will then save it and apply those changes. As pointed out before, we want to make sure that the CIDR that we've set up, which is 100 through 199 for our DHCP range of handout, does not overlap any of the addresses that we've given. So these 100 IP addresses that we're handing out to people, 100 through 199, do not overlap with the ones that I'm issuing, which is 50, 51, and 52 within the CIDR. The next thing that we need to do to make this somewhat more dynamic when we're writing these rules is to create an alias. So if we go to Firewall and Aliases, and we add a new one. Let's call this alias Restricted Devices. Now you will notice that you cannot put a space, so you have to use an underscore between words. In our case, we're going to give it a description, devices with restricted usage of the network, and we're going to say that these are hosts, meaning these are singular IP addresses. And we will start to enter the IP addresses that we've assigned these. They were 50, 51, and 52. And if I remember correctly, 50 was an Xbox One. this was a iPad. And this was our Nintendo DS. We have now created a restricted devices list of these IP addresses, and we are one step closer to accomplishing what we need. The next thing we need to do is create a schedule. So we go to Firewall and Schedules, and then click Add. Schedule name. In our case, we're going to call it allowed usage for Bobby, because we're going to have a fictitious child named Bobby in this case. Times and days of the week that Bobby can use the internet. So let's say we want to let Bobby use the internet Friday, Saturdays, and Sundays. So what we did was we just simply clicked the days of the week. The time that Bobby can use it is starting at 0 hours, which is midnight, and stopping at 11:59 in the evening, or 23:59 hours. And we can click Add. Now let's say, for example, Bobby is off during Christmas break. So we also want to let Bobby use it, or Bobby's done something to earn some extra time to use the internet. So Bobby is off from the 20th until the 31st of the month. Now we can overlap the days, even though we've already opened up Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, by simply clicking each one of the days that we wish to add for more time. And we'll give them the full access, and we might add something in the notes section here for holiday break. So now every Friday through Sunday, regardless of the month, during these times, we can use this. Maybe we want to call this general access time. Here we have a holiday break that we've added, and of course you can add and remove time from this at will, because now that we've created it, you'll notice there is now an allowed usage for Bobby object, and we can always go in, edit it, and add and remove time from Bobby. We've now done all the pre-work that we need to do to get this working. The last remaining bit is to create a firewall rule. So we're going to go ahead and go over to Rules, and then we're going to go to our LAN interface, because that's really where we're setting up this rule. Before writing the rules, it's important to understand the order of operations of the rules within PfSense. They start from the top of the list and work their way down. In other words, as a rule is read by the firewall, if the condition is met, that rule is applied, and the firewall will not read any remaining rules. Therefore, it becomes important for us to create two rules that operate in the following order. The first rule will be an allow rule, permitting access from the devices that we've created a list for during the hours that we built into the schedule, accessing any devices that we wish them to access. If the condition of that rule is not met, in other words, it is something coming from an address not in that list, or it is something in that list that is happening during hours not specifically allowed, the firewall will continue reading to the next rules. In our case, the very next rule will state any devices coming from within that list are blocked from accessing anything else. I'll go ahead and build those two rules right now. We'll begin by inserting above our main LAN rule. This is going to be our pass rule. The only thing we're really going to change is to make the protocol any, and we need to do this for both of these rules. We're also going to change to single host or alias for the source. And as we start typing restricted, our alias list will automatically come up for us. In our description, let's go ahead and put allow access during specific times for Bobby. The next thing that we need to do is to go into the advanced options, scroll down. Near the bottom, you'll see the word schedule. It's a drop-down box, and you'll see that the schedule that we created is already listed there. allowed usage for Bobby. Go ahead and select it and click Save. The only other thing that you might want to do is enable logging for what Bobby is doing on the internet. To do that, just go back into the rule that we just created just before the advanced settings, so we'll just hide them to make it a little easier. You'll see log packets that are handled by this rule, and click Save. Apply those changes. As I said before, we need to have a second rule. Let's go ahead and create that now. In this case, the rule is going to be to block. Again, the protocol should be any. And the source, once again, will be a single host or alias, and we will insert the restricted devices list. Let's go ahead and log those packets as well, and in our description we're going to put block Bobby's devices from the internet, and then we'll hit Save. The rules are currently out of order. To put them in the proper order, we apply, drag the block rule below the allow rule, because remember the order of operations, and then click the Save button. Apply the changes, and we're all set. At this point, anything on Bobby's list during the allowed hours will be able to access the internet. If it is not one of the allowed hours, the next rule is read. Devices that belong to Bobby will be read as part of our restricted devices list and will therefore be blocked. If a device is not on the restricted list, the next rule is read, which is anything else on the LAN subnet can now get to anything else regardless of the time. So you still maintain the ability for all your devices not on the restricted list to access, and you're blocking and providing access to Bobby during specific times. To add or change devices that this rule applies to, you can simply come over to where it says restricted devices and click it, or go firewall, aliases, and then modify the restricted device. Both of them will take you to the same screen. Here you can change the IP addresses of any of the hosts, add or delete hosts as is needed. Likewise, if we go and look at our rules, or the schedule itself, you can go ahead and edit any time that Bobby can access the internet. Take time away, or grant more time. I hope this helps you and helps you keep Bobby safe.